We usually think of marketing as this incredibly deliberate and frankly, incredibly expensive process.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like, you spend thousands, maybe millions of dollars. You carefully craft a narrative. You run focus groups. You hire agencies.
The whole 9 yards.
Exactly.
Kid.
All with this singular goal of, trying to get people to like you.
Yeah.
But what if your most effective marketing team was actually a group of people who absolutely despised you?
I mean, it completely flips the script on how we think about commerce, right?
Right.
Because we are hardwired to believe that praise sells and criticism sinks you. It's why we obsess over 5-star reviews online.
Oh, absolutely. We live and die by them.
Yeah. But history, and frankly human psychology, tells a much more complicated story. Sometimes the people who are screaming the loudest for your downfall, they're inadvertently doing all the heavy lifting to make you a household name.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're looking at an article by Michael Woodruff, and it's titled, "When Critics Do Your Marketing, Useful Idiot Marketing."
It's a fascinating piece.
It really is. And for you listening, your mission today is to travel back with us to this really bizarre cultural moment in 1988.
Yeah, we're going back a bit.
We are. And we want to figure out the actual mechanics of how outrage fuels visibility. And more importantly, we're going to look at that old cliche, the one all press is good press.
Right.
We want to dissect whether that actually holds up for your everyday business or if it is just a massive, dangerous trap. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to understand the mechanics here, we really have to look at the environment where this phenomenon thrives. And Woodruff, he grounds his whole argument in this personal memory from his childhood.
Yeah, we are in 1988.
Exactly.
And the author is what, an 11-year-old kid in Arkansas, right?
Yeah, just a regular kid.
I love this framing so much because he points out that his entire cinematic universe at that time consisted of, well, very standard kid fare.
Right.
We were talking Big Top Pee-wee and the New Adventures of Pippi Longstocking.
Classics.
Right. That was his reality. And you have to remember, before the internet, an 11-year-old's world was pretty insulated.
Oh, completely.
Grown-up, heavy philosophical films, they didn't just casually cross an 11-year-old's radar.
No, they definitely didn't. And, the box office data from the source material really validates that memory, too.
Yeah, let's hear the numbers.
So, Big Top Pee-wee pulled in about $15.1 million. Pippi Longstocking made around $3.57 million.
Okay, so solid numbers for kids' movies.
Right, those were the movies pulling in the middle school demographic. But then, crashing directly into this 11-year-old's consciousness out of nowhere was an R-rated, highly philosophical adult drama.
Which is so weird.
It is. It was Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. And that movie pulled in $8.37 million domestically.
That anomaly is just wild to me. For you listening, imagine a middle schooler today completely ignoring the massive, billion-dollar marketing campaign of the latest Marvel movie.
Right.
And instead, they're obsessively tracking the release of a dense, controversial, 3-hour indie documentary about theology.
It makes no sense.
It defies all logic, especially when you consider Scorsese's background. I mean, this is the guy who made Taxi Driver and Goodfellas.
Yeah, gritty stuff.
Very gritty. And this film was a complex, R-rated look at a human conflicted Jesus.
Yeah.
That is a niche film for a very niche adult audience.
Yeah.
It was supposed to stay firmly in its lane.
It absolutely was. And, the studio wasn't delusional about that either.
Right. They knew what they had.
Exactly. They certainly didn't allocate a massive marketing budget to target middle schoolers in the Midwest. They weren't buying commercial spots during Saturday morning cartoons.
Obviously not.
Right, because the natural audience for a nuanced philosophical religious film is just very, very small.
So if the studio didn't pay for a massive, cultural saturation marketing campaign, how did an 11-year-old know all about it?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Like, who's actually doing the marketing?
Well, that is where the source material introduces this concept of useful idiot marketing.
That's a great term.
It's a very provocative term, right? But it describes a very specific phenomenon. It's when offended bystanders or protesters or vocal critics,
Right.
when they accidentally do the promotional work for a product they are actively trying to suppress.
I want to look at the sheer scale of how this happened in 1988. And just as a quick note for you listening, as we look at this historical event, we are just looking at the facts laid out in the source material to understand the marketing mechanics.
Exactly, just the facts.
Yeah, we aren't taking a side on the political or cultural debates here.
Yeah.
But the source notes that prominent religious right leaders at the time, specifically James Dobson, of Focus on the Family, and Jerry Falwell of The Moral Majority, along with Donald Wildman of the American Family Association. They organized massive national denunciations of the film.
And they mobilized a staggering amount of people. I mean, they didn't just express disappointment, they initiated widespread boycotts.
Yeah, this was huge.
Very huge. They held very public protests in Los Angeles and at least 8 other major U.S. and Canadian cities. From their perspective, they were defending their faith against something they perceived as profoundly offensive.
Which is totally understandable from their point of view.
Right. They wanted to bury the film entirely.
But the irony is that by trying to bury it, they actually built a massive pedestal for it.
Oh, a huge one.
They handed Scorsese a level of cultural visibility that the studio could never, ever have afforded to buy. Every protest on the evening news, every warning given from a pulpit, it was essentially a free, highly effective commercial.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how the source highlights a quote from Willem Dafoe.
Oh yeah, he played Jesus in the film, right?
Yeah, he did. And he pointed out that the vast majority of this massive, loud opposition came from people who hadn't even seen the movie.
Wait, really? They hadn't seen it?
Most of them, no. They were protesting a pure abstraction. They were protesting the perceived threat of an idea.
Wow.
Yeah. Scorsese had publicly stated his intent was quite earnest. He wanted, quote, to get to know Jesus better by exploring the humanity of someone considered fully divine and fully human.
Right, it was meant to be an exploration.
But the nuance of the art just didn't matter to the outrage machine. And the author of our source material, who writes openly from his own perspective as a follower of Christ, he makes a really profound philosophical point about this overreaction.
Yeah, he argues that faith isn't protected by refusing questions, right?
Yeah.
That art is, it's supposed to disturb and probe.
Yes, exactly. He essentially says that if you believe Christ conquered death, well, he probably doesn't need a boycott to defend him from a movie theater.
That is such a strong point.
Right. The author is pointing out that this massive cultural panic gave the film power it didn't inherently possess. The overreaction manufactured the allure.
And contemporary reporting at the time proved it worked perfectly. I mean, theaters were sold out.
Completely packed.
Ticket buyers were literally telling reporters that they were only there because Christians were trying to stop the film from being shown.
It's the ultimate backfire.
It really is. The outrage didn't just generate a little bit of buzz. It was the Primacy vehicles selling out the theaters on opening weekend. The critics literally became the marketing team.
Which forces us to ask a harder question, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely.
The outrage machine definitely worked to get people into the seats, but does that forced, controversy-driven visibility actually make a product successful?
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because Woodruff, the author, he drops a massive caveat right in the middle of his own article.
He does.
He just spent all this time explaining how brilliantly effective this accidental marketing was, right? But then he tells us what he actually thought of the film itself.
Yeah, this part is crucial.
Despite all the explosive cultural hype, and despite Scorsese's earnest intent, the author found the movie to be, quote, slow and lackluster.
And that detail, that right there, exposes the hidden trap of useful idiot marketing.
Yes.
Because it creates this massive surge of awareness, but it masks the actual quality of the product. The marketing creates a promise that the product now has to fulfill.
Let's drill into the psychology of that mismatch for a second. For you listening, it's like a restaurant that goes viral on social media for a crazy stunt, right?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
The hype gets a huge line out the door. But if the food is served cold, no one is coming back.
Exactly. That mismatch is fatal. And synthesizing the core lesson from the source material, we arrive at a really fundamental truth about business. Attention is not the same thing as trust.
I love that. Attention is not the same thing as trust. Let's break down the mechanics of that difference, because people use those two words interchangeably in business all the time.
They do, and it's a huge mistake. Attention is transactional. It's a spotlight. Right.
But trust is relational. Buzz and controversy are incredibly powerful tools for turning on the spotlight. They can generate curiosity, which gets people through the door once.
Just that first time.
Exactly. But a spotlight doesn't fix a broken product. In fact, if the spotlight turns on and your house is a mess, the attention didn't help you, it just exposed you.
Oh, that's good. It just exposed you.
Right. In the case of The Last Temptation of Christ, the outrage got the film talked about far more effectively than the film got itself loved.
Because the audience that showed up, they weren't Scorsese's actual audience.
No, not at all.
They weren't cinephiles looking for complex camera work, and they weren't theologians looking to debate the dual nature of Christ. They were cultural tourists.
Cultural tourists, yes. Perfect way to put it.
Right. They just wanted to see the thing that was making everyone so angry.
And when the movie ended, those tourists left feeling underwhelmed. I mean, the attention spiked massively on opening weekend, but there was no long-term trust or loyalty built with that new artificial audience. They didn't care about the art.
Exactly. They didn't become lifelong fans of the director or the studio. They just moved on to the next controversy.
Which brings us to the most practical part of this deep dive for you, the listener. Because it is so easy to look at a sold-out theater or a viral, controversial social media post with millions of views and think, how can I manufacture that for my own project?
The temptation is huge. We see brands trying to engineer this every single day online.
So what does this all mean? If you are running a brand, managing a team, or owning a small business, should you try to leverage this?
It's a tricky question.
Like, should you post that deliberately polarizing hot take? Should you insult a competitor just to game the algorithm and get the outrage machine to carry your message?
Well, the author's warning here is incredibly stark, and it's grounded in the reality of scale. There is a profound danger in playing with this kind of spark.
Yeah, it's playing with fire.
It really is. A massive national movie or a sprawling political campaign, they can live off conflict. They can survive outrage. But local businesses simply cannot.
Let's talk about the sociological mechanics of why that is. Because on the surface, attention is attention, right? Why can a movie studio survive a boycott, but, say, a local plumber gets destroyed by one?
It comes down to something called relational distance. A movie studio in Hollywood operates on a macro scale. They are functionally anonymous to the person buying a ticket in Ohio.
Right, there's no personal connection.
Exactly. If 1 million people hate the movie, but another 1 million buy tickets out of morbid curiosity, the studio makes its money. The transaction is over and they move on to the next film. The geographic and relational distance protects them from the fallout.
That makes sense.
But local businesses, like a cafe, a general contractor, a therapist, or a family farm, they operate in a highly concentrated micro-ecosystem.
They operate in a closed loop, and I think that's the key. In a local market, relationships last significantly longer than headlines.
100%.
A movie studio can afford to burn a bridge with 10% of the population because there are 300 million other people to sell to. But if a local bakery intentionally pisses off 10% of their town just to go viral on local Facebook groups.
Oh, that's a disaster.
It permanently alienated their actual neighbors.
Yeah, you've won the attention of the day, but you have poisoned the well for the decade.
Wow, poisoned the well for the decade.
Because you've generated heat, but you've actively destroyed trust. And in a closed community, trust is the only currency that actually converts into long-term survival.
You essentially become the punchline of your own community. Like, people might be talking about you. They might all know your name. So the marketing works.
Sure, if you want to call it that.
Right. But no one is going to hire the guy who acts smug and picks fights online to come into their house and remodel their kitchen.
Exactly.
The attention does not convert into trust.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author summarizes this with a brilliant piece of advice. He says, small businesses do not need more heat. They need more clarity.
I love that distinction, heat versus clarity.
It's crucial. When you rely on heat, on outrage, provocation, or forced controversy, you are just creating noise.
Right.
What everyday businesses actually need is a better message. They need a stronger offer. And critically, they need to give people fewer reasons to roll their eyes.
Because forced controversy is so transparent now, don't you think? Like in 1988, a national boycott was a genuine cultural event.
Oh, yeah, it was massive news.
But today, forced outrage is just exhausting. When people see a local business or a personal brand trying to play the villain just for clicks, it doesn't make them genuinely curious, it just makes them tired.
Exactly. The gamble of useful idiot marketing is the hope that angry people will carry your message for free. And sometimes, on a massive impersonal scale, they actually will.
Right, we've seen it happen.
But on a micro scale, trying to weaponize your critics usually just leaves you standing in a room surrounded by angry people who refuse to ever be your customers.
It fundamentally shifts how we need to think about visibility.
Yeah.
I mean, we started this deep dive looking at an 11-year-old's memory, completely insulated from a massive cultural war raging over a Scorsese film.
Yeah, quite the journey.
We broke down the accidental, almost tragic irony of how the people who wanted to destroy a piece of art ended up being its greatest publicists.
Yeah.
And we unpacked the psychological trap hidden inside that success. Generating cheap attention is easy, but building actual trust is the only thing that sustains a business long term.
That's the real takeaway. The people trying the hardest to suppress a message are often the very vehicles helping it travel. But as we've seen, traveling fast isn't the same as arriving at a destination you actually want to be at.
Right. If you build an audience of tourists who only showed up to watch a train wreck, you really shouldn't be surprised when they leave as soon as the fire goes out.
This raises an important question, though. Something for us to think about beyond the scope of 1988.
Ooh, okay. What is it?
Well, we've been analyzing a time when a coordinated national outrage was a rare, monumental event. It cut through the silence.
Right, it stood out.
But what happens to useful idiot marketing when an entire culture becomes immune to outrage?
Oh, man. That's deep.
Right. If we live in a digital world where everyone is constantly screaming about absolutely everything every single day, does the backlash still sell tickets? Or does the outrage just become the new white noise?
That is a fascinating thought to sit with. If everything is an outrage, then nothing is.
Exactly.
I want you to ponder that question the next time you see a brand trending on your feed for all the wrong reasons. Are they brilliantly playing the game, or is the game just playing them? Thank you for taking this deep dive into the source material with us today. Just remember, sometimes your most vocal critics really are your best marketing team.
But a megaphone won't save a bad product.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Catch you next time.